The ocean's curse. The ocean stretched endlessly under the silver light of the moon, its waves whispering secrets to the wind. Nerina, youngest daughter of Queen Caelora, sat on a jagged outcrop of coral, her tail shimmering in hues of azure and emerald. Her voice, clear and haunting, carried over the water like a phantom's hymn, weaving tales of longing and wonder. She sang not for the sea tonight, but for the world beyond it. Far above, the human world was a mystery that called to her with a relentless pull. The ships she glimpsed from the depths seemed like creatures of legend, their sails ghostly wings against the horizon. Yet it wasn't the ships that captivated her now. It was the memory of a man. Weeks had passed since the night she saved him, yet his face lingered in her mind. Elias, the sailor with eyes as deep as the midnight sky, had been clinging to a fragment of his broken ship when she found him. He'd been unconscious, his breath shallow, his body battered by the sea's fury. Without hesitation, she had lifted him to the surface, her voice a lullaby to keep him anchored to life. She left him on the safety of the shore before vanishing into the waves. But something in that moment had bound her to him, as surely as if the ocean herself had woven their fates together. And so, Nerina sang. Her song was her heart's compass, guiding her to the rocky cove where she had left him. She didn't expect him to hear, let alone remember. Yet the melody was irresistible to her soul. On the cliffs above, Elias stood, entranced. He had thought the song was a dream, a fleeting memory from the night he nearly drowned. But here it was again, pulling at his heart like a siren's call. He followed the sound, his steps slow and hesitant, until he saw her. Nerina's hair cascaded like liquid gold down her back, and her luminous skin seemed to catch the moonlight itself. She sat at the water's edge, her tail flicking gently in the shallows. For a moment, Elias could do nothing but stare, torn between awe and disbelief. "You're real," he whispered, his voice nearly lost to the waves. Nerina turned, startled. Her first instinct was to flee, but something in his gaze stopped her. It wasn't fear or greed, or the curiosity that humans so often wielded like a weapon. It was something softer, something that mirrored the ache in her own heart. "You remember?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias nodded, stepping closer. "I remember your voice. It brought me back. I didn't know if I imagined you, but..." He gestured helplessly toward the sea. "I've been looking for you." Nerina's heart raced. This was dangerous. She knew the laws of her kind, the warnings her mother and sisters had drilled into her since birth. Yet here he was, flesh and blood, and she couldn't bring herself to leave. For hours they talked. Nerina told him of the ocean's wonders, of glowing reefs and shimmering schools of fish that danced like living rainbows. Elias shared tales of his travels, of bustling ports and starlit skies. They spoke as if the world had narrowed to this single moment, this single connection. But as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Nerina's joy was tinged with dread. She had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. The ocean's laws were absolute, and her bond with Elias was a defiance of them. Yet the thought of losing him, of never hearing his laugh or seeing his smile again, was unbearable. As she slipped back into the water, Elias called after her, "Will I see you again?" Nerina hesitated, her heart warring with her duty. "Perhaps," she said at last, her voice trembling. "But not here. It's not safe." With that, she dove beneath the waves, her heart heavier than it had ever been. Unseen by either of them, the ocean stirred in disquiet, its depths darkening with the first whispers of a brewing storm. The azure abyss was alive with its usual symphony of sound, the clicking of coral shrimp, the hum of glowing jellyfish, and the gentle roar of distant currents created a harmony that pulsed through the merfolk's underwater city. At the heart of this kingdom stood the great shell palace of Queen Caelora, its spires carved from shimmering pearls, rising majestically toward the water's surface. But within its opulent halls, the mood was anything but serene. Sigtrath, Nerina's elder sister and the kingdom's most vigilant enforcer of the sacred laws, paced before the queen's throne. Her crimson tail flicked with impatience, and her piercing eyes glinted with suspicion. "Mother," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the court's murmurs, "Nerina has been seen near the surface again. This is not the first time." Queen Caelora's expression was a mask of calm, but there was tension in her voice. "She is young, Syrath. Curiosity is natural. Curiosity is not an excuse to defy Thalassia's laws," Syrath snapped. "The surface is forbidden for a reason. She risks far more than her own safety." The queen's gaze softened as she thought of her youngest daughter, so bright and full of wonder. "I will speak to her," she said finally. "Leave it to me." But Syrath's instincts told her this was no mere youthful folly. Determined to uncover the truth, she left the palace, her crimson tail streaking through the water like a comet. Far from the palace, Nerina sat in a secluded grotto, her mind churning with guilt and longing. She traced patterns in the sand with her fingers, remembering Elias's voice, his warmth, the way he had looked at her as if she were a wonder. It was foolish, she knew, dangerous, but her heart ached for him all the same. "Lost in thought, little sister?" The voice made her startle, and she turned to see Syrath hovering at the entrance of the grotto, her arms crossed and her expression severe. Syrath, Nerina stammered, her tail curling instinctively beneath her. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Syrath said, her tone sharp as the edge of a broken shell. She swam closer, her eyes narrowing. You've been spending a great deal of time near the surface, haven't you? Nerina's silence was answer enough. Sirath's expression darkened. You've met a human. No! Nerina lied too quickly. I would never... Don't insult me with your lies. Sirath hissed, her voice low but furious. I've seen you. Do you have any idea what you are risking? The curse is not a story to frighten children. It is real. If Thalassia discovers what you've done, she won't, Nerina interrupted, her voice trembling. I'll end it. I swear Sirath studied her, doubt flickering in her eyes. Finally, she said, You'd better, because if you don't, I will. That night, Nerina sought out Dorila, the ancient sea witch who dwelled in a cavern far from the kingdom. The witch's lair was a labyrinth of jagged rocks and bioluminescent fungi, glowing faintly in the darkness like stars trapped in the ocean's depths. Dorila herself was as enigmatic as the sea, her form half hidden in the shadows, her voice a rasping whisper that seemed to echo from all directions. So, the little songbird comes seeking answers, Dorila said as Nerina approached, her golden eyes glinting with amusement. I wondered when you'd find your way to me. How do you know? I know many things, Dorila interrupted, waving a webbed hand. The currents carry whispers, child, and your heart sings louder than the tides. Nerina hesitated, then said, I need your help. I've fallen in love with a human. The witch's laughter was a dry, brittle sound like shells breaking underfoot. Oh, how predictable. And what do you want from me, child? A way to be with him? Or a way to forget him? Nerina swallowed hard. I want to protect him. And my kingdom. Is there a way to break the curse? To stop Thalassia from... There is no breaking the curse, Dorila said sharply, her voice cutting through Nerina's hope. It is as old as the ocean itself. But there is another way. What is it? Nerina asked desperately. Dorila's golden eyes gleamed. You could surrender your voice to the ocean. With it, I could weave a spell to shield the human from Thalassia's wrath. But such magic comes at a price. My voice. Nerina touched her throat, her heart sinking. Her songs were a part of her soul. Without them, she would be hollow, incomplete. But the thought of Elias suffering for her mistakes was unbearable. I need time to think, she said finally. Time is a luxury you do not have, Dorila warned, her voice echoing ominously as Nerina swam away. As Nerina returned to her cove, the water seemed colder, darker, as if the ocean itself disapproved of her choices. Above, the moon watched in silence, its pale light spilling over the waves like a warning. In her heart, she knew she was running out of time. The storm began as a whisper. The sea's surface churned uneasily. And deep below, the waters of the azure abyss grew unnaturally cold. The merfolk felt it first. a ripple of unease that turned their songs into silence. Something ancient and vengeful was stirring, a force that all the kingdom feared but dared not name aloud. Nerina, back in the sheltered cove where she had first met Elias, felt the shift in the ocean as if it were a shadow passing over her heart. Her decision weighed heavily on her. To give up her voice and protect Elias, or to walk away and save her people from Thalassia's wrath. She had lingered too long, and now the goddess was awakening. Unaware of the brewing storm, Elias stood at the shoreline scanning the waves. Every night since their last meeting, he had returned to this spot, hoping for a glimpse of her. He couldn't explain the bond he felt with the mysterious woman of the sea, but it was undeniable, as if their fates were entwined. When Nerina surfaced, Elias's face lit with relief. "You came back." "I shouldn't have," she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Elias, this is dangerous. For both of us." "I don't care about danger," he said, stepping closer to the edge of the rocks. "I care about you." His words struck her like a wave, both comforting and painful. She wanted to believe in their connection, but she couldn't ignore the growing threat beneath the waves. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "There are rules, laws of the ocean, that cannot be broken. What we've done, it's forbidden." Before Elias could respond, the sea erupted in a violent surge, throwing him back onto the rocks. The waves rose higher, glowing with an eerie light, and the wind howled as if the heavens themselves were crying out in anger. In the center of the chaos, a figure began to emerge. Thalassia. The ocean's goddess towered above the water, her form both beautiful and terrifying. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, her eyes a piercing aquamarine that glowed with the fury of 1,000 storms. Her voice thundered through the night, shaking the very air. "Nerina!" she roared. "You have betrayed the sacred pact. You have defied the laws that protect our world." Nerina swam forward, trembling but resolute. "Goddess, please! Silence!" Thalassia's voice was a tempest, silencing even the crashing waves. She turned her gaze to Elias, her expression one of disdain. "And you, mortal, have lured my daughter into ruin. You are unworthy of the depths." Elias, though terrified, refused to back down. "I didn't lure her into anything," he said, his voice steady, despite the goddess's overwhelming presence. "We met because fate brought us together." "Fate?" Thalassia's laugh was cruel, echoing across the sea. "This is no matter of fate. This is a violation of balance, and it must be corrected." The waves rose higher, circling around Nerina and Elias like the coils of a great serpent. The goddess's power was palpable, the air thick with it. Nerina felt her heart shatter as she realized what was to come. "Please, goddess," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Spare him. Punish me. But let him go." Thalassia regarded her coldly. "You would sacrifice yourself for this human?" You would abandon your people, your kingdom, for the fleeting love of a mortal. Yes, Nerina said without hesitation. Because love is worth any price. The goddess's expression darkened, and her voice grew colder. Then you shall pay that price. But know this, Nerina. Your sacrifice will not undo the damage you have done. The curse has awakened, and your kingdom teeters on the brink of ruin. With a wave of her hand, Thalassia summoned the curse in full. The water round Nerina began to glow, turning to chains of coral that wrapped around her tail, binding her to the ocean floor. She cried out as the chains tightened, their magic sapping her strength. Elias, watching in horror, rushed into the water, fighting against the waves to reach her. "No!" he shouted. "Take me instead." Thalassia turned her gaze to him, her expression unreadable. "A mortal's life is but a flicker. What could you possibly offer that compares to the eternity she will endure?" Elias met her gaze, his voice unwavering. "My life, my soul, whatever it takes to free her." Thalassia paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. For a moment, the storm seemed to still, the ocean holding its breath. Then she spoke, her voice like the rumble of distant thunder. "You would give everything for her, even knowing it may not save her kingdom." "Yes," Elias said without hesitation. The goddess's expression softened, ever so slightly, though her power remained undiminished. "We shall see if your love is as strong as you claim. But for now, the curse remains." As the waves closed over Nerina and Elias, the ocean's fury grew stronger, a warning that the worst was yet to come. The azure abyss was shrouded in darkness. The once vibrant coral gardens now seemed dull, their colors muted as if the life had been drained from them. The merfolk moved in silence, their songs replaced by whispers of dread. The curse was no longer a tale of the past. It was here, wrapping itself around the kingdom like a suffocating tide. Nerina lay at the heart of the ocean, her tail bound by coral chains that glowed faintly in the darkness. Her once bright voice was a mere echo now, stolen by Thalassia's wrath. She was alone, isolated in a prison of her own making, her heart heavy with regret. The weight of her choice pressed down on her as the ocean seemed to mourn around her. Above, Elias fought against the waves. The storm raged on, its fury undiminished. But he pressed forward, his determination unwavering. The memory of Nerina's sorrowful eyes gave him strength, pushing him beyond the limits of his mortal body. He had made a promise to protect her no matter the cost, and he would see it through. As he descended into the depths, guided by the faint glow of the curse's chains, the water seemed to resist him, pushing him back with every stroke. But Elias was relentless. The ocean's chill bit into his skin, and his lungs burned for air. But he refused to turn back. This was his path, and he would follow it to the end. In the shadows of the ocean floor, Dorela watched. The sea witch had foreseen this moment. though even she could not predict its outcome. She had told Nerina that the curse could not be broken, but there was a sliver of hope, one that required a sacrifice greater than any she had ever witnessed. As Elias neared the glowing chains, Dorilla appeared before him, her golden eyes gleaming in the darkness. "You are a fool, mortal," she said, her voice cutting through the water like a blade. "Do you not see that you are powerless here?" Elias stopped, his chest heaving as he fought to catch his breath. "I don't care," he said, his voice strained but resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes." The witch studied him, her expression inscrutable. "There is a way to break the curse," she said slowly. "But it will cost you everything. Tell me," Elias demanded. Dorilla's gaze flickered to Nerina, who lay motionless in her coral prison. "To break the curse, you must give your life to the ocean, not as a man, but as a creature of the sea. You will become something neither human nor mer, bound to the ocean's depths for eternity." Elias's heart sank. He had dreamed of a life with Nerina, one where they could walk together on the shore, laugh under the stars, and live without fear of the ocean's wrath. But now he saw that dream for what it was, a fantasy. The only way to save her kingdom, was to let go of the life he had known. "If it saves her," he said finally, "then I'll do it." Dorilla nodded, her expression softening ever so slightly. "Very well, but know this, mortal. There is no turning back." Elias looked at Nerina one last time, his heart aching with both love and sorrow. "I'm ready." The sea witch raised her hands, her voice rising in a chant that echoed through the water. The ocean seemed to pulse with energy, the current swirling around Elias as the transformation began. His body glowed with an otherworldly light, his form shifting and reshaping as the ocean claimed him. When the light faded, he was no longer human. His legs had fused into a powerful tail, shimmering with the colors of the deep, and his lungs had adapted to breathe the water. The coral chains around Nerina shattered, releasing her. She gasped as the curse's grip loosened, her strength slowly returning. When she opened her eyes, she saw Elias, no longer the man she had known, but something new, something wondrous. Tears filled her eyes as she swam to him, her heart overflowing with both gratitude and heartbreak. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I couldn't let you suffer," he said simply, his voice gentle despite the change in his form. "I love you, Nerina. That's all that matters." As they embraced, the ocean seemed to calm, the storm above dissipating into a serene stillness. The curse had been lifted, its power undone by Elias's sacrifice. But the cost was undeniable, and the weight of their choices lingered in the water around them. In the distant halls of Thalassia's domain, the goddess watched in silence. Though her expression remained stern, There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Perhaps respect, perhaps sorrow. She turned away, her power receding as the ocean returned to its natural rhythm. The first light of dawn pierced the ocean's surface, sending shafts of gold through the water. The azure abyss seemed to awaken from its nightmare, the dark pall of the curse lifting at last. The coral gardens, once muted and lifeless, began to glow with renewed colour, and the songs of the merfolk hesitantly returned, soft and tentative like a gentle tide. In the heart of the ocean, Nerina and Elias floated together. The transformation had left Elias changed but radiant. His new form a harmonious blend of human and sea creature. His tail, powerful and sleek, shimmered with iridescent blues and silvers, and his movements were fluid, as though he had always belonged to the ocean. Yet his eyes remained the same, filled with warmth and love as they met Nerina's gaze. "You gave everything," Nerina said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers traced the edge of his now webbed hand. "For me." "For you," Elias replied, his voice steady. "And for your kingdom, it was never just about us." Their moment of peace was interrupted as the currents shifted, carrying with them the presence of Queen Caelora and her court. The queen approached, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. Behind her, Sirath swam cautiously, her usually stern demeanor softened by the gravity of what had transpired. "Nerina," the queen said, her voice regal, yet tinged with emotion. "You have risked much, too much, and yet, it seems, your love has brought us salvation." Nerina lowered her head, her guilt surfacing anew. "I never meant to put the kingdom in danger. I only wanted to..." Her words faltered, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. Caelora raised a hand, silencing her gently. "What is done cannot be undone. But the ocean has spoken. Elias's sacrifice has restored the balance, and the curse has been broken. Thalassia herself has withdrawn her wrath." Sirath, stepping forward, added, "The kingdom will heal, Nerina, but we must not forget the cost. This will serve as a reminder of the delicate balance between the ocean and the surface." Nerina nodded, her heart heavy with both gratitude and regret. She turned to Elias, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you, how to even begin repaying you." Elias smiled, his expression serene, despite all he had lost. "You don't owe me anything, Nerina. This, being here, with you, is enough." The days that followed were a time of rebuilding. The merfolk worked together to restore their homes and mend the damage left in the curse's wake. Nerina and Elias became symbols of unity, their story spreading throughout the kingdom as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. Despite his transformation, Elias struggled to fully adapt to his new life beneath the waves. The ocean was vast and beautiful, but it was also unfamiliar. Its rhythms and secrets alien to a man who had once lived by the sun and stars. Yet, with Nerina by his side, he began to find his place. One evening, as the moon cast silver glow over the sea, Nerina led Elias to a hidden cove, a place she had discovered as a child, where the water sparkled like liquid diamonds. Here she sang for the first time since the curse had been lifted, her voice filling the air with a melody of longing and hope. Elias listened, captivated, as her song wove through the water, a tribute to their journey and the love that had defied even the wrath of a goddess. "I wish I could give you back what you've lost," Nerina said when her song ended. "Your world, your life." Elias reached for her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "I haven't lost anything," he said. "Not really. I've gained something far greater." In the distant depths, Thalassia watched. Her domain was quiet, the balance restored, yet her thoughts lingered on the mortal who had defied her expectations. Love, she realized, was a force that could challenge even the oldest laws of the sea. With a wave of her hand, she sent a ripple through the ocean, a subtle blessing for the two who had risked everything for each other. As the first light of a new dawn broke over the horizon, Nerina and Elias swam to the surface together. The world above and below seemed to shimmer with possibility, the ocean calm and welcoming, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The horizon was no longer a boundary, but a promise. A reminder that love, though fraught with trials, could bridge even the deepest divides. Nerina sang once more, her voice carrying across the waves like a prayer, her melody one of redemption and unity. Beside her, Elias gazed at the sky, his heart at peace. And so, their story became a legend, a tale whispered in the currents and carried by the winds, a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and the unyielding bond between the sea and the shore.